Yes, I am local. So thank you very much for bringing me here. And I would like to thank many of the people who are here who were part of the research protocol, which was carried out locally. I'm going to be telling you about digestive tract in Parkinson's disease. It's quite trendy, and for the past 20 years or so, maybe a little bit too much, but we can talk about it. And if we're to talk about the digestive tract and Parkinson's disease, there are some important elements that I need to remind you of. In our digestive tract, we have a number of things. We have the enteric nervous center. It's not a nervous system, sorry. It's not the most important population in our gut, but it is essential, and we'll get back to it. We have some at every stage of the intestine, at the lower part of the esophagus, in the stomach, in the whole intestine, in the colon, and even in the rectum. There's a bit less, but we even have some there. So throughout the intestine, we have neurons, and it's a system which is a bit specific. It is closed in, if you will. It's an irregular system which is made up of little nodes, and I can show it to this. It looks a little bit like a very fine net, and it's an irregular system, and we'll get back to it. But it's an important nervous system for the well-being of the gut, and it enables the mobility of the digestive system. And if it doesn't work well, we're highly constipated. And it also regulates finer things such as the digestive secretion. It has to do with absorption and so on. I can go back on my slides. Good. So you can see the myenteric and submucous plexuses, and this enables us to produce stools, and the other one, which is closer to the lumen. And I have my figures, I always forget them. It's a bit like France's debt. We tend to forget about it. But a German team showed that in a human digestive tract, there are 168 million neurons meshed again. An important element, it's often said that this nervous system is autonomous, which is true. In a petri dish, if you bring air and food, it's going to contract on its own for a while. But as you can imagine, it's autonomous, but a little bit controlled. Let's say it's a teenager. Not everything is done independently, and there are connections between the gut and the brain. And this is called the autonomous nervous system, which is a system we don't think about. I'm talking to you and digesting at the same time, but I'm not thinking about the need to digest and secrete and so on. We call this by different names, and there's a very important element, which is the vagal nerve, which goes between the base of the brain and the intestine, and it enables an exchange on a two-way exchange, if you will. It's like a highway. An important element about this enteric nervous system, and this is something a bit old now, As you know, the intestine is more easily accessible than the brain. You can take little pieces of intestine during a fibroscopy or a coloscopy, and you'll be well aware that from time to time you need to have a coloscopy, and the surgeon will take a biopsy. The biopsies are usually there to see whether there are cancerous or precancerous lesions. But what we've shown in is that in the lab, if we stretch the lesions, get rid of the intestinal cell layer, which is specific for the gastroenterologist, most often you have access to neurons. The neurons I was telling you about, those who are inside the submucous plexus. You can imagine the system. It looks a bit like a fishing net. Sometimes there are no neurons, but sometimes there are some. And when we do get some, we can analyze them. So this is from the 2010. But we can not only see the neurons, which is shown here on this slide. In the square, in the box, you have 3 neurons, and you can see this network, this incomplete network, just on a biopsy. So this is not to show you a picture of my wife, even though she's the one who shot the videos and we're still married. She works at the lab and she made this video. I just wanted to show you, and I have to advertise for research, don't I? But it's a real challenge to be able to identify those neurons in digestive biopsies, because those are very tiny, they're very small. If I press here. Anyways, these digestive biopsies are very small. They're about 4 or 5 cubic millimeters, a grain of rice. Sometimes it's basmati rice, and sometimes smaller. But it's a real challenge to be able to analyze cells, which are not intestinal cells, but neurons, based on those biopsies. And this, as you can see, requires a lot of patience. You need to dissect them, stretch them, use pins, very fine pins on a box. All of this under a binocular device so that it works. Now, if I talked about being able to look at these neurons, you can imagine that the lab's work has shown that based on those biopsies, not in everybody, but we could find the same anomalies as in the central nervous system. Now, this is a central nervous system disease, a brain disease, and to say that we can find this disease, we need to be able to, when we look in the microscope, see little inclusions which are present in the neurons. Those are called Lewy bodies. And I've put pictures of my friends from Angers, specialized in neuropathology, and they've analyzed this under the microscope. And you can see that there's a little ball, which can be seen on some pictures. On other pictures, it looks like a little thread. Those are called Lewy bodies. If it's present, it means it's Parkinson's disease. It's not something similar. It is. Now, the techniques highlighting them are quite different. These are older pictures, but my colleague, who's a neurologist in Lille, took them. And in parallel, we can see the same pictures as the ones we can find in the brain. We can see this little red clump, which is present in the digestive tract, which is very similar to the one found in the brain. And we can see threads which are the same ones as the Lewy body we can find in the brain. In a large proportion of people, you can find the same lesions in the digestive tract as in the central nervous system. Hélène Pouclet at the lab, I think she's now called Mrs. Courtemanche. These pictures came from stomach biopsies, and you can see that we were able to identify the presence of the disease here. The previous biopsies were done on an entire intestine. This was due through biopsies. These enabled us to analyze the neurons present in the digestive tract and whether they were processed or dissected properly. We can find the same lesions. And this is an important element. So all of this of parallel damages in the brain and the intestine has, of course, raised quite a lot of interest. And since there's this communication between the brain and the gut, people thought, well, maybe the disease starts in the gut and then reaches the brain through this autonomous nervous system we were talking about. And some people thought, well, no, maybe the brain influences the gut and communication goes from top to bottom. And of course, other people thought that it could be a two-way communication. And there's yet another possibility, which is to say that all of this is independent. There's no communication between the two. Those two processes develop in parallel. And it doesn't have anything to do with communication. And I've put two pictures of two guys here. One is younger than the other. The one at the top is very well known because he's the one in 2006 to think that this could all start in the gut. And I put another picture of Per Bergamer, who does functional imagery, and he's worked a lot on this type of scenarios in order to find scenarios on both possibilities. Is it first the brain or is it first the gut? I'm doing this very quickly just to show you the latest data from the lab. If we look at what Pergamer and Brack suggest, that it would start in the gut, and we need to be aware of going too fast. But if the disease starts in the gut, the intestine of people suffering from Parkinson's disease should be too porous. We have a barrier in the gut. The cells of the gut are there to protect us. It's supposed to be a quite closed system and not too porous, because if it becomes too porous, it would just leak a lot of crap, if I may say so, through. And this could go to the neurons or elsewhere. Now, in the disease, if we start from the digestive origin, then the intestine would be too porous. And at the lab, we thought, well, since we can analyze the permeability through biopsies, we could analyze the permeability of the Parkinson's disease patients. As you can see, we can study this permeability, and I'll show you how we can do it, but we need to remember that this is a complex system which is easily summarized. All of these cells which are present, which line our gut, are present throughout the intestine. The neurons are right underneath, and they are held together through little molecular locks, if you will. If the locks are sturdy, the cells resist well, but if they're a bit loose, then more things can go through. And I'll get back to it, but some proteins are making up these locks. It's a quite clever system with proteins going through the membranes. And I'm not a good mechanic, but it's a bit like a little wall you would put, and there are little screws to hold everything together. So what we said in the lab is we're going to analyze people's biopsies, and if we want to analyze them, of course, we can look at the proteins making up this little lock system, but we can also analyze them functionally. I didn't put the video here, but this is very similar to what I showed you. It's a very tiny biopsy, a grain of rice. It is stretched and dissected and put in a little cassette, which is put in a chamber, and where there is a first chamber and a second, depending on what we want to look at. There's a fluorescent marker that we can monitor, and we can see how fast it goes through the biopsy. As you can imagine, the more porous the intestine, the faster it'll go through. The more resistant it is, the slower it will go through. So let me get back to this. You'll remember this was the same picture. Dr. Lorraine Leclerc-Visonneau, specialized in sleep, worked on this, and Thomas Clérambault worked in the lab. And when we analyzed the passing of those molecules, and we compared between Parkinson's patients and non-Parkinson's patients, we looked at the difference, and there wasn't any, which is a bit strange. And we thought, well, no, this does not support the digestive origin of the disease. But another element we need to remember is that there's not only the functional aspect, but maybe it's the little locks, even though it doesn't have a direct consequence on what we can see. Maybe those little locks have problems. Now, Thomas Clérambault, who was working with Lorraine at the time, was very good with microscopes, and he had found ways of taking a better look at biopsies, and he looked at them as if he were looking at them from the inside of the gut with a specific technique. And you see that they're like beehive structures in people who don't suffer from Parkinson's, and in the patients suffering from Parkinson's, we can see that it's a bit disorganized, as if these little locks were, even though they maybe still work, they're not as efficient, maybe. And we were a bit disappointed because we expected more digestive permeability in the patients and the PDs. We found morphological problems, but no functional problems. And this supports what Pauline was saying before. We know that this disease is highly progressive, and there can be specific sleep disorders appearing 5, 10, 15 years before the very first signs of the disease. So, early symptoms. And Lorraine is specialized in sleep, so we thought these people who have people with sleep disorders, in particular ERM, REM, sorry, sleep disorders. And we thought that we had to analyze people who had an early onset disease. So we looked at digestive biopsies for people who had an REM sleep disorder. And here you can see different measures. I just wanted to show one element here. If we look at people very early on with people suffering from REM sleep, we see no difference between these patients who already have clear Parkinson's, and people who don't suffer from Parkinson's at all. So what can we say? There's a lot to be said, but we can say that there are probably lesions which are almost identical between the digestive tract neurons and the brain neurons. This is something which has been proven. And there are advantages and drawbacks, but it's easier to carry out a gut biopsy than a brain biopsy. If we want to do research, it might be interesting. Now, this being said, there's still a question. Does this really play a role, has a function in the development of the disease? Is it a mirror of what's going on in the brain, which is great? Or can the gut trigger or enhance the development of the disease? We don't know. We still have to investigate this. And I'd like to thank France Parkinson, because you've been here for a long time, but beyond France Parkinson, I'd also like to thank the associations, the local associations who've been very dynamic. The Parkinson's Association from Vendée, from Loire, and without them we could never have launched this research. Especially in the digestive sector, for the past 15 years, we've been supported by patient associations, local and national, which has enabled us to develop more active research. And there's now a European network, thanks to what was initiated locally and nationally, to enable us to work within the network. We have a Slovak, an Italian, and a German partners to analyze the role of the digestive tract, and I will leave it at that. Thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation. We're going to move on to questions. Could we have the first question? And we'll see if you followed the presentation. What element links the intestine to the brain? The vagus nerve, the optical nerve, the sciatic nerve, or the facial nerve? 100% vagal nerve, so people have listened well. This also enables us to relax and move on to the next one. Optical nerve, we'll talk about it later. And then we can move on to the next question. If your intestine could talk, what would it say about Parkinson's disease? In one word. Turn around, move. Oh, darn. Digest. Beep. Buy. Jam. The objective here is to relax. Obviously, once one word appears, more ideas come. We'll let it go on for a few instants. When you're online, you can also participate, and then we'll be moving on to something totally different. There are a lot of questions about sleep and about the gut as well, which have come online. There are many words, and we're going to move to the last presentation with Sarah Meoni from Grenoble, and we're going to be talking about feminine side of Parkinson's.